Welcome back to episode number 29 of the Altered States Unplugged podcast. My name is Kyle Strubing. I am one half of the dynamic duo here, but I am flying solo with you here today. I know that sounds scary, but we'll get through it. We're talking about something that's very near and dear to my heart, something that I've talked about for a very long time and have been communicating in the store to people for about the last 5 years. So today we are going to talk about flotation therapy in regards to the power of doing nothing and how float therapy can reset your mind, your body, and your life, right? So with the flotation therapy, you guys have all seen them in the stores. It is a huge driver, something that, I know I said this before, I'm going to say this again, something that is a huge game changer for me. Jojo and I were very open about this, went on a wellness journey approximately 7 years ago, and we found flotation therapy. For me, it really helped me with anger. Now that we were off all of the, the substances, you realize why you were doing some of these substances. And for me, it was kind of push all that stuff down. When the substances are no longer there, that stuff comes out. So float therapy for me really was a game changer because it allowed me to shut off. And we're going to go into a lot of that, how float therapy works, kind of the science and the benefits of stillness, right? The science of stillness. And you guys know this, right? We live now in a world where we're constantly on the phone and there's all of this stimulus coming in. We celebrate the hustle, right? The late nights, the endless days. Jojo and I have a thing that we say when something happens and we have to go to work, it's no days off, right? And that's really kind of in the social vernacular right now and kind of in our orbit, and it's all about go as much as you possibly can. But the idea with that is doing the exact opposite, right? So if you're able to go ahead and eliminate all of that stimulus so that your body, so that your mind can really focus inward. I liken it to like mental autophagy. So autophagy is the process of like your body kind of ridding its own dead and bad cells. Autophagy is stimulated through fasting. So when people do a lot of these longer fasts, me personally, I can't fast for all that long, but I can go, like the 6 and 18 type fast, which is I'm good with. But these longer fasts, it's putting you in a calorie deficit, but what it's doing is it's shifting your brain, shifting your body to rid itself of the dead cells, or kind of lackluster cells. So what float therapy does is really shuts that out so that you can focus inward. That's the whole idea. So what we're going to do is on this, or what I'm going to do on this episode, is kind of unpack what float therapy really is, kind of what happens to your body and to your brain when you're inside of that tank, and why science is finally kind of catching up to what we've known for a very long time. The one thing that we've found out is that stillness can heal. And that's what we're going to dive into. So let's go ahead and do that. What is float therapy? Float therapy is also known as sensory deprivation, right? I try to stay away from sensory deprivation because it gives you that, kind of Altered States, the movie vibes here. But what it really is it's called, the acronym for it is REST, R-E-S-T. So that's short for Restricted Environmental Stimulation Therapy. That involves floating weightlessly in that warm water with about 1,100 pounds of Epsom salt, right? So you get in the tanks. We have them at the stores. We've talked about those a million times. But what we do is we heat the water to exactly 93.5 degrees. Why do we do that? Because that's the temperature of your skin. So you don't know where the water stops and you start, right? So that kind of helps create this out of body feel. And what it's really doing is alleviating kind of your feeling sense. That's the idea here. The room or tank is dark, it's quiet. And what it does is it gives your nervous system a chance to fully unplug, right? In the tanks that we have, you're able to manipulate the sound and music as you go in. You've heard our kind of overall flow practice, but I'll touch on this, right? Get in, get down, get comfortable, turn the lights off, turn the music off. You work your way up to it. The beauty of our tanks is that if that gets a little overwhelming, you can always turn the music back on right away, right? But what we're trying to do is get rid of all of that stimulus, whether it's light, sound, obviously smell. You can't hear anything in there. We recommend earplugs so that you can't necessarily hear anything. You will still be able to hear the music. But what we're trying to do is get rid of all these senses so that you can then focus inward, right? Float therapy was originally developed in the 1950s by Dr. John C. Lilly. If you want to go down a YouTube rabbit hole, type in John C. Lilly and go through his whole escapades. Really fantastic. The guy was, I don't know, man. He was unbelievable. He was a literal genius. He started float therapy to study kind of human consciousness and how the brain behaves when all external stimulation is removed. They started floating and they were vertical, right? So they would wear masks, right? And so they would float in the water while they had masks, and they would pump oxygen in so that they could sit there. Almost think of like Star Wars with Luke Skywalker floating around in that capsule, right? And then go through, if you want to keep digging down that YouTube rabbit hole, kind of the Samadhi brothers and all that stuff on how they took float therapy moving forward. But the point is, like with Lilly and all that, he started this as just a scientific experiment, and it's now evolved into what it is today, which is a therapeutic practice that's used by pro athletes, by creatives, by first responders, and anybody who's craving deep rest, right? So I've dealt with and coached and done services with UFC fighters and Cy Young Award winners and, NBA players, first round draft picks, all of that, down to your high driving, high striving business people is another thing. And then even that, right? Everybody in between, right? Because we all need it. We have this phone, we have the stress, we have, people needing our time, our energy. And then this is a way to really, we use in a therapeutic sense to kind of channel that back. So as you're going through this, I always want to know, what lever are we pulling, right? What is, if we're talking about a certain service, regardless of what it is, what is the lever that's actually being pulled, right? With sauna, you're talking heat shock proteins, all that stuff, right? So it makes sense to me. With float therapy, we'll go through kind of what happens in the brain. We live in constant stimulation. I've said this 3 times, right? Notifications, stress, caffeine, our brains stay in what's called a beta state, okay? That's a state of alertness, of problem solving. Think of it primal, right? We were, however many thousands of years ago, we were nomads roaming, and, we hear a crack in the woods, and we think it could be right away you think it's a tiger who's going to eat us, when in fact it's just a squirrel. That's what we're constantly doing. We're constantly processing it. So think of it on an evolutionary track. Inside the float tank, we're shutting that off. It's safe. You're insulated. You're warm. You're in your own head. So it's a lot more safe. What you're trying to do, it's eliminating that sensory input. And studies show that the brain naturally shifts into theta waves, the same state that is when we're in deep meditation, right? So I kind of butchered that, but think of theta as the deepest meditation. I would say theta is like meditating on steroids. Now, since I've been floating for so long, I can't get there in meditating. It's just a thing. I've kind of spoiled myself, because now when I get into the float, I'm there and I can float. Whereas with meditation, I still have that small, whether I'm doing it at home in the morning, I can hear the dog, I can hear the HVAC turn on, things like that. So it really eliminates that and pushes those theta brainwaves. But what were the mechanism and the lever that's being pulled are those theta brainwaves. Theta brainwaves are linked to creativity, memory consolidation, and emotional processing. When JoJo and I have a thing or something that we want to, or a problem we're trying to solve that's just not coming, we've gotten to the point now where we'll just say, hey, We'll be sitting there racking our brains. We'll sit there and say, hey, let's just float about it. So the two of us will go and float, and then we'll compare notes together afterwards. And for some reason, well, I know why, because your theta brainwaves have been engaged. We're really able to find a lot more solutions. And I think that's because we're calm and we're able to focus inwards too, right? We're able, really, it's a focus thing. So research published in the Journal of the Frontiers in Psychology found that after a single 60-minute float session, participants experienced significant reductions in anxiety and muscle tension, along with feelings of serenity and happiness. That's the post-float glow that we talk about. Customers come out of the tank feeling refreshed, rejuvenated. They say, "Oh, this is like being rebirthed out of the womb." That's this post-float glow that they have. You can see it in their face. You can see it in their eyes. They feel rested. They feel calm. They feel comfortable, confident. Another study, we'll keep digging into the science here, is from Sweden's Karlstad University, and that tracked stress markers in frequent floaters and found that they had an average 31% decrease in cortisol. And cortisol is the bad boy for the body and in stress. Higher the cortisol, the more stress you're going to feel, right? So yes, that's what as they go through, it's reducing the cortisol. It's giving them, kind of power over their own life and over their own mind through this stillness and this serenity. Everything slows down, right? That's the idea. So we talked about the mental. Now let's talk about the physical, right? How it affects the body. It is deeply, deeply restorative for the body. So you're floating in 1,100 pounds of Epsom salt. And what that does is it really, think of the Dead Sea times 100, right? If that water were to come down, or if the water were to chill, to like room temperature, we'd start to get crystallization. There's so much, and I just say this to explain to you how much salt is really in this thing, but you have to heat up the water and expand the water molecules to get that amount of salt in there. That's how important it is. So with that being said, as you're floating on top of this salt, it's not like your pool, right? And people are like, I just float in my pool. It not to this level. The water line kind of sits almost here. It's like laying on a waterbed without being touched. Highly recommend. Very tough to put into words here, really. But what it's doing is it's supporting your entire weight, and you're also not being pressed down, by gravity. So like if I were to lay on a couch or something like that, you're feeling it in your back and all that stuff. So what it does with the zero gravity, it supports your entire weight. And then it allows your muscles and joints and spine to decompress. When I get in there, I can feel in my spine. I have, I've had back issues or whatever, but I noticed that it really kind of realigns me pretty well. I can actually feel pops and I can feel things moving, and that's the spinal decompression. They put a marker on it, so it's nearly 0 pounds per square inch of weight on your body. Even now, as I sit here, you're still feeling the effects of gravity. So we're totally eliminating all of that. And that's what a lot of pro athletes are doing that. Yes, for the mental, but for the physical, right? And it helps with injury prevention, and really faster recovery, right? So because you have that decompression, that weight then off your joints is the idea. Also, another big thing, something kind of obvious, right, is that's magnesium, guys, right? And magnesium does really well through, kind of breaks the skin-blood barrier transdermally. So through your skin, it really absorbs very, very well. You know this, right? You take Epsom salt baths. Think about it, or Epsom salt baths or Epsom salt soaks. Think about it as like, 1,000 times more salt. It's really, really helps with the muscle soreness, all that stuff. So what it does is it reduces the inflammation, it regulates muscle and nerve function, and it helps support sleep and serotonin production. So it's like, a lot of people take magnesium capsules or powders before they go to bed. You're getting it through your skin, through your whole body. So it has that exact same effect. Magnesium is considered nature's chill pill. And studies show that about 60% of adults are deficient in magnesium. So that's a big thing. And this is going to allow you to get a whole nother dose, essentially working it from the inside. You know, if you take the capsules, you get it from the inside, and then with the float, you get it from the outside. You're keeping that inside out approach, right? Clinical trials published in BMC Complementary Medicine and Therapy show regular floating can reduce chronic pain and tension headaches, with some participants reporting relief lasting days after your session. That is one thing about float therapy that's fantastic is, yes, you feel great that day, but it lasts to 2 to 3 days of just this overall calm, this reduction in soreness, things like that. Okay, so now we know kind of what we're doing here, what it is, what we're doing. Now what to expect during a session. So in any float center, or at least our float centers, you'll start by showering. You shower first, you shower before, you shower afterwards, right? That first shower, what we want is, you know, what you want to do too, is remove all of the oils, lotions, all of the product basically that you have on your skin. Because we want to create, you know, we want to get rid of any, well, we don't want it to get in the float tank first, but second, you want to eliminate any barrier that magnesium can soak in. That's a big thing. The water feels silky and warm in there, right? So it doesn't feel like even the water in the cold plunge, right? So it's almost thick. Like when I go in and like if I'll test something or when I float, it feels definitely not a gel consistency, but it has a much thicker consistency. But that's the salt, right? And that's what's going to help keep you up without any effort or any strain. You can float, you know, like I said before, you're in total control of this thing. Yes, please get to full sensory deprivation, but get what you need out of this. If you want to float with the door open, lights on, music on, and get what you need out of it, then please, by all means, but try to go to full sensory deprivation, and you can always go back, right? In the first few minutes when you get in there, do the, you know, get in, get down, get settled, you know, kill the lights, then kill the music, and then you can kind of always work your way back. But as I'm doing that before, you know, I kind of do a little preparation, you know, because you can get a little mind chatter in there, like, holy cow, what the heck am I doing in here? This is really weird. It's hard to relate it to anything. But as you slow your breath, you're cognizant of your breath. I do a lot of box breathing, 4 in, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. That's going to allow you then to take control of your breath, slow your body down, and then as your body slows down, your thoughts and your mind will then start to slow down, and then you'll start to kind of drift off as the theta brainwaves start to engage. After about 10 to 15 minutes, most people experience something called the hypoagogic state, and that's a deep meditation zone where the body is asleep but the mind remains aware, right? So at this point, I notice this is the point where I start to hear my blood rushing through my veins. I can hear my heart pumping. You feel super connected and you feel super alive. So that's really, you know, let's take you're almost, I don't want to say paralyzed, but you're almost like kind of like in a sleep paralysis thing. And yes, you could move, but you're just as super still to you. And then you really feel your lungs and your heart and all that. But that's what they call the hypnagogic state. Okay. This same state is linked to bursts of creativity and problem solving. This is where the magic for all that happens. Some of the most creative thinkers like Einstein, Edison, and all that, they used relaxation techniques, breathing techniques of the like to do things like that. And now, you know, with the technologies that we have today, we're able to facilitate that and really optimize that zone for that. Yes. So sessions are typically around 60 minutes, but your sense of time fades completely. Once theta engages, you lose concept of time. People are like, well, I slept in there the whole time. You didn't sleep. You're not grounded, so you're not going to sleep. That's the theta brainwave state. I'll float for, 2.5 hours. It feels like I'm in there for 15 minutes. But what you're doing, because that's, just like sleep, you lose concept of time. So it's actually really nice. Gentle music fades in, so as you're sitting there floating, you've gone through your whole float, then typically the music will come on, the lights will come on, and then that's your cue to kind of hop out. You shower. What I recommend is rehydrate, and then shower, rehydrate. If you got time, journal. Journaling is fantastic, and the float tank really puts kind of a bow on everything that, on the whole experience in general, right? And then but people, as they do this though, they emerge with that post-float glow. You want to kind of take it slow. I'm real cognizant not to step into, or I'll bring sunglasses or something too, because it takes your eyes a minute to adjust to the light. But yeah, so, now we know kind of what the overall experience is like. We've done a ton on float, kind of next level floating things as well. So, go dig into those episodes if you'd like. But yeah, so we'll just go over some of the research here. 2018 meta-analysis in PLOS1 found that float therapy consistently decreases stress, anxiety, and blood pressure while improving well-being and sleep. In 2016, researchers observed that people who floated weekly for 6 weeks reported up to a 40% improvement in overall mood. Who doesn't want to be in a better mood, right? And I believe with this, it was once a week. So weekly, I recommend personally float once a week. I love floating on Sundays. I think it's the best day to float. Put a bow on last week, get yourself ready for the next week. And that's a little bit different float. And we're happy to coach and kind of guide you through all that. Another piece of info, neuroscientists have even used fMRI scans during float sessions. The scans showed a reduction in activity in the amygdala. That's your brain's fear, stress center, fight or flight, stuff like that. And it showed an increased activity in the areas that are tied to introspection and empathy, right? So we could all use a little bit more empathy in our lives. And then another fascinating study that we threw on here is that floating for 90 minutes activated the same brain regions associated with mindfulness meditation, even in people who have never meditated before. Meditation on steroids, right? I talked to Dr. Feinstein, who I talk to fairly regularly, and his magic number, I asked him flat out and was like, what's the best, optimal time to be in the float tank and this, that, and the other? And he gave me you get what you need, And I think that's a good point, right? I mean, you go in there, and if 15 minutes is all you need to get your head right, then that's all you need. But I was able to get out of him that 72 minutes is kind of where the magic is. But yeah, 90, your first float, do it for an hour, push through it. And then your second, third, first float, we always say is kind of the worst float, right? And it's all about practice with this. And then as you feel free and to go an extra 30 minutes to get you past that. I find it about 75 minutes. And when I asked him that question, I was hoping he was going to say 75 minutes, and he said 72. So I feel like we were right on there, because I noticed for me, that's when things really start to get interesting. And I make a lot of breakthroughs at that time, but obviously not everybody has access to that. So don't be afraid to go longer is kind of the idea there. But yeah, so that's some of the science, the overall experience, things like that. Next, we want to talk about the ripple effect of floating in your daily life. So not only does it help you relax during the session, what it does is it retrains your nervous system to stay calmer long after you leave. Anecdotally, this is 100% true. This is 100% true. First time I floated, I was like, I got out, we did it. I was like, okay, that was cool, whatever. But I noticed for 3 days afterwards, I really, really just had this calm about me, which is not me. I'm high energy all the time, go, go, go. It just really helped me just kind of be mindful and more present. So it was great. A lot of our regular floaters, and we've tracked this, they talk about, or they report deeper sleep. They stay asleep longer. They don't wake up as much, things like that. They're a lot more focused, and they get they're a lot more focused, and they're more focused in their decision making. They've reported a lot less muscle soreness and a sense of gratitude and patience, right? You're now calm. You're now, you're now able to take on things. You don't have that sensory overload by simply giving your brain a break. And that's what's called the carryover effect. The idea that a calm body teaches your brain what safety and rest feels like, so it starts returning there more easily. Now that you've been there, you know how to go there. I recommend a lot of times too, when when something stressful comes up, I'll use that same breathing pattern as I use in the float tank, outside of the float tank, to kind of bring myself back down and back into, kind of a mindfulness. And if something were to happen, things like that. In surveys, over 80% of floaters report long-term improvements in stress levels, sleep, and life satisfaction after just a few weeks of consistent floating. Yeah. Your body knows that your brain and body know it's going to get that rest. It knows it's going to have that moment where it can reconnect. And then you spin it forward to being able to do some problem solving things inside of the tank. So it's fantastic. And then what's the beauty of this, right, is it doesn't take any skill. It doesn't take any technique. It's just a willingness to let go, right? Just being still, being calm, and allowing yourself to go there is the idea. It's the art of doing nothing. That's what you're doing in the float tank. Just do nothing and be okay with that is the idea. So in closing, the idea, right, is that in a world that measures our worth by what we produce, float therapy reminds us that rest can actually be productive too, right? As you get more busy, this is what I do, right? I know Sunday night, that's a non-starter, I am floating. And if you want to book or talk to me during that time, that's not going to happen. But I know, and then my mind and my body can then, I can go as hard as I have to up until that point, because I know I'm going to get that rest. And it's not, think of it not just as like some spa experience. Think about it as science. Think about it as neuroscience for your whole nervous system, right? We're training our nervous system. We're giving it a break, right? The more we allow our bodies to feel weightless, the more our minds will learn to be free, right? Once your mind won't relax unless your body is relaxed, right? Especially in the float tank, there's nothing else you can think about, right, in there. So if you have a shoulder issue or you have something like, one of my practices is I'll do kind of a body scan to say, Kyle, we're going to relax our toes at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, Kyle, your toes are relaxed. Then I'll move on to my feet. And then once that happens, I feel like if I skip that step of going through my whole body, my mind won't be able to kind of get off of that, right? So body first, mind second, and then you really start to float. The more we allow that, right, the better off you're going to be. And then your body can have that, your mind can have that recall back to that time. If you've never tried this, highly, highly recommend. Obviously, I'm biased, but giving yourself that hour, taking that so you can fill up your cup so that you can give from your cup, right? It's a big, big thing for me. We go fast, we go hard. If I have not taken care of myself, I have nothing to give. And it's just not, it's almost selfish, right? Yes, I want to be able to give, but I got to give to myself, but you have to be selfish in that own right. I find even sometimes, regardless of what people do, whatever service that they do at the store, because we have, 7 or 8 of them, the sheer fact, it doesn't matter necessarily what it is, the sheer fact that you did something for yourself and took time being with yourself and focused on self, that in and of itself is very powerful as well. So treat yourself is what I'm trying to say, right? But focus on that stillness, getting rid of that stimulation and all those things, right? Sometimes it's exactly what you need, right? And that's, as we go through all this technicality and red light waves and all that, sometimes you just need to shut everything off, and that's the goal here. So that's it for this episode. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Like, share, follow. If you have any questions, hit us up on socials or at alteredstateswellness.com. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I will see you next time.